You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Before you come at me and say that no game is easy in college football, right? Just hear me out. I am not saying that Syracuse football has a quote-unquote easy schedule down the stretch. In fact, when I look at their schedule down the stretch, I would say there's one gimme win on the schedule, right? They should handle their business the second last game of the season at home against UConn, right? This is not UConn basketball. This is UConn football, all right? They should be able to beat UConn football the second last week of the regular season, all right? So I am not here to tell you that the schedule for Syracuse football down the stretch is easy. What I am here to tell you is that it is much more manageable compared to the previous 3 seasons. And it's one of the reasons why I believe Syracuse football will avoid some major collapse in the second half of this season, all right? They will avoid a major collapse. That is the theme of this episode. When we take a look at Syracuse's schedule down the stretch in 2024 this season, they have one ranked opponent left. That is Miami at home to close the year. 3 of the final games for Syracuse are at home. Let's now analyze the schedule from the previous 3 years. All right. Let's go to 2021. We're going to go in chronological order here. 2021, 2022, 2023, right? 2021, Syracuse football, 5-4. They need one more win to make a bowl game, right? First off, they had 2 road games in their final 3. At Louisville, which, okay, that one should not have been as bad as it was, but it was a blowout. And then they had to play NC State on the road, who was ranked, a ranked NC State team. Then, to close the season, Syracuse football played a ranked Pitt team at home, who, by the way, their quarterback would go in the first round of that year's NFL draft. Kenny Pickett, ring a bell? I know he's not the greatest in the NFL. He was damn good in college. There was a reason why he was a first-round pick. And Syracuse football had to face him in their final game of the season to make a bowl game. It didn't end up turning out well. So they had a tough schedule to close that year. They were 5-4, but I remember looking at that time thinking if they don't beat Louisville on the road, they're probably not going to win the final 2, and that's exactly what happened. Right? So they ended up going 5-7. 2022, Syracuse football was 6-0. Remember that, right? Their next 4 games after they were 6-0, you ready for this? At number 5, Clemson. Notre Dame at home. At Pitt, who finished that year 8-4. And number 25, Florida State at home. So Syracuse had 2 ranked teams in that 4-game span after they started 6-0. And all 4 of those teams ended the year ranked. So those were all top 25 teams in the country. So yeah, the 6-0 start was amazing. It felt great. That Purdue game, when I think it was the 3rd game of the season, was an absolute thriller. It was a thriller at home. Remember, they beat NC State to get to 6-0. That was a ranked team in NC State they beat at home, albeit with a backup quarterback. But still, you can't take that away from them. They beat them. It was amazing. Having said that, though, think about that 4-game stretch that they had to go through. Think about that 4-game stretch. At number 5, Clemson, who they almost beat. They almost beat Clemson at home that year, or on the road, I should say. Notre Dame at home. At Pitt, who ended up the year ranked. And home against Florida State, a ranked team at the time, and ended up being a top 10 team, I think, when the season ended. That is a brutal schedule after you start 6-0. Brutal. So I guess the silver lining of that season was, I guess they could have done better than 7-5, but there was no way they were doing much, much better. Maybe 8-4 was maybe their ceiling that year, even with a 6-0 start. Last season, all right, Syracuse football was 4-0. We were all feeling pretty good about that. But their next 3 games, what were their next 3 games after that? Clemson at home. I know Clemson was struggling at the time. That's a team, though, that finished the year ranked. They were still pretty good. All right. They finished the year 8-4. That was a quote unquote down year for Clemson when they were 8-4. All right. At number 14, North Carolina, who just so happened to have one of the best quarterbacks in the country that year in Drake May. You may have heard of Drake May. He's on the New England Patriots right now. He got knocked out of the game with a concussion against the Jets. Should have been helmet to helmet, but that's neither here nor there. And I'm a Jets fan telling you that. He was pretty good in college. Drake May, number 3 overall pick. They had to face him. And then at number 4, Florida State, the team that went undefeated, won the ACC, didn't get in a college football playoff, but that's a discussion for a separate, or that's a separate day discussion there. But when they started 4-0, that was a pretty brutal 3-game stretch right after that. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. 2 ranked opponents at the time. 2 of those opponents finished the year ranked. The one that didn't finish the year ranked was UNC, who again had Drake May. This season, for Syracuse football, their schedule is a lot more manageable compared to the past 3 collapses. It's a lot more manageable. I'm not saying they're going to run the tape. I'm not saying the schedule is easy for Syracuse football. I don't think it's easy. I'm just telling you there's 1 ranked opponent left. That's Miami. 3 of their final 5 games are at home. They got a gimme game in UConn. Sure, they got to travel to the West Coast, but I've seen teams win on the West Coast before. We'll see how Syracuse does with that. There are no more bye weeks if you're interested in that. There's no more bye weeks for Syracuse football. So overall, they have a lot more manageable of a schedule this season compared to the prior 3 years. And it's one of the reasons why I believe that Syracuse football will avoid some major second half collapse.